substation.
Okay, so the first thing that I do when I come to a substation is basically take a picture of the placard. It tells me where I am, what's the address of the substation, and what's the name of the substation. So later on, as I'm going through all my pictures, until I see another placard after this one, I know that I'm still at the Calvin substation. The second thing that I do before we get deep into the substation is take 2 or 3 overall shots of the substation and how large it is, so they can get an idea of how many breakers, how many transformers, that kind of thing. If all you rely on is just zeroing in on the equipment itself, you can never really tell what the whole scope of the substation is. The next stop would be basically looking at the transformers. You always have a high side and a low side. Generally speaking, the high side we don't deal with because the high side has plenty of clearance. The low side is what we're after, if you will. So if you look at these two, you can easily see the difference between the high side and low side. What we're going to do is start at the low side of the transformer on bay 1 and work our way through, then go over to the second transformer and work our way through the same way. So you start at the first transformer. What we're looking at here on the transformer is obviously we have a high side and a low side. The high side we don't really bother with because it's over our voltage level anyway, but if you look at, you can see all the clearances that are there. On the low side, in the front here, we want to cover that up. We want to cover the arresters that are in front of it. We want to cover the jumpers coming over. And then in the front, we want to come out about 36 inches or more away from any of the ground, so where the arresters are. So I would basically run the split host kind of product all the way up into where you see the spreaders on the conductor. So coming from the low side, working our way across the bay, the first thing that we're going to see on the back side is we're going to see CTs up on the top. We're going to see fuse cutouts just below that. Down here are PTs overall. Those all need to be addressed and covered. And at the very, very top, there's a gang switch overall that feeds all the bus work. Flipping around to the back side of that same structure, now we have CTs down at the bottom. We have hook switches in the middle, more CTs up on top, and of course that same gang switch. Also over in the corner there's a station utility transformer. Basically that's already covered, but it needs a little bit more work. Coming around on the back side now are the breakers. So basically this is the one bay that feeds that, or comes off that transformer, if you will. So all of these bushings on top, there's 6 bushings per breaker. All the hook switches above that, not necessarily any of the bus work on top, but basically the breaker bushings, the conductor coming up, and the hook switches. And a way to get an idea on size is that connector right there is a 4-hole NEMA pad. So that's about 4 1/4 inches square. So if you use your mental vernier here, or your eyeball vernier, you can see like, okay, how many of those squares would fit across the top of that insulator. Okay, so overall in this bay, what do we see? We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 breakers in this bay, and then the one down at the bottom, or the one down in the middle there, is the bay switch to go from one transformer side to the other. Since they're all the same, I don't take pictures of every one of them. I'll just take a grand picture of all of them at the same time, because it's going to be the same cover for each one. Things to note here, on this outside breaker right here, you can see that instead of one switch coming off of each lead, there's basically 2. So you have to make sure that you count those insulators as well for squirrel guard kind of thing. Okay, looking at this bus tie breaker, basically you treat it just like any other breaker for the most part. You know, you got your hook switches, you have the bushings, and you have the conductor coming up. If we look a little bit higher though, so now you see there's 3 gang switches way up at the very top. Then there's some underslung insulators that are below, hanging on, that bus is hanging on, and that's what we'll think about, is maybe covering that on that level. One thing to keep in mind, if you notice here, that you have two transformers, and they look to be the same, but they're not. If you look at the arresters on the front here, on the first transformer, you have the polymeric arresters, taller, thinner kind of thing, new style. On the other one, you have the old porcelain style arrestor. So don't assume that when you're in there that everything is going to be the same from one bay to the next. There are always going to be differences. Just a couple of things to think about right here. One is that on that structure, on the getaway structure, we're going to wind up probably putting a squirrel guard of sorts up on each one of those bus support covers. When I look at the fuse cutouts, all of them have load brake horns on them, and our covers do not fit with those.